here we are again, and I'm being joined by writer, broadcaster, and author of English Wine Book, my old mate Oz Clarke, and again by Kieron Atkinson of the English Wine Project. Now, we are just going on a little trip down to the Bolney vineyards in Sussex. So we've got 3 wines that we want to show you and try with you and get some expert opinion before we're joined by Samantha, who is the winemaker at Bolney, to tell us more about the wine. So let's get cracking. I think the first wine we're going to try is the Blanc de Blanc. So let's see those labels.
Yep, here we go.
Here we go, indeed.
Looks fantastic. Looks fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Let's get it out. Now, mine was quite lively, Kieron. What about you?
Mine was very lively to the extent of I thought it might have gone through the ceiling.
I wondered whether mine was a bit warmer. In fact, I shoved it in the fridge for a half an hour. I left it a little bit warmer than usual because I thought I want to get all the flavour off this. And I realised it didn't need it because this has got tons of flavour and I think is a really interesting style of Blanc de Blanc. 100% Chardonnay, all estate fruit from a year like 2016, which was, well, it's another of those strange. It's so easy to look from the outside at a vintage and say, oh, it's not going to be any good because the spring was terrible and then there were frosts around the place and summer didn't really come till about the middle of August. But when it came, it didn't go away again until late in October. And that crucial 8 or 9 week period just meant that so long as the grapes can dribble along slowly in the first couple of months of spring and summer, if by the time the middle of August comes and September particularly comes, if it then all gets nice and ripe and warm, September 2016, one of the days in September was the warmest September day for over 100 years. 34.4 degrees centigrade on September the 23rd or something. That is hot. So this was in this period when even if our summers weren't great in England, we were having fabulous autumns. And I think this 16 is a really good example of that.
I love the aromatics on this wine. I think it's what I find so interesting about it is it's almost got the aroma profile of a still wine, and it's one of the first, I would say, serious English wines from the big producers where they've achieved that. And I'm looking forward to talking to Sam whether or not that was a conscious decision to do that, or whether or not they really tried to bring out those big aromas which they've achieved in abundance.
And the texture, Kieron, we've been tasting quite a lot of Blanc de Blancs over the last few months. Most of them have been successful, but on that lemony, sort of austere, rather serious, rather haughty kind of style, which is an entirely valid style and a very attractive style. Mm-hmm. And suddenly we get to this, which is creamy, which is fluffy. I thought there was a sort of gentle richness, like my mum's sort of Victoria sponge. The bits of the outside of the cake which are just slightly brown from the oven and from the baking tin.
Absolutely.
And also the confectioner's cream inside, not dairy cream, that vanilla-y confectioner's cream. And I just thought, this is absolutely fascinating. How has Sam done this? Now she's got a nice warm sandstone site facing south. I've been in the vineyards once or twice, and walking up, whenever the sun comes out, you can feel the heat radiating off the soil. I've picked those soils up in my hand, and they're really sandy. They've got a sort of silkiness, but they just disappear through your fingers in the sand. You think, where's the clay? There's got to be some clay there, but it feels incredibly fine and warm. But I wonder, she must be doing something else.
I get it. I think it's so interesting. You know, the wines we tasted and the styles we tasted of the wine, that have been quite austere, that have been quite serious, and then you tend to, if something's been through malo and they've tried to do that and bring out the creaminess, often you do get sour cream. But you're absolutely right. This is rich. It is that kind of almost I don't want to say confected because that's the wrong word, but it is like Say again.
You know what I mean? But the word is confectioner's cream. It's
Mm.
because that's what people who are making little buns and cakes for kids' parties. That's what they use, and it's a sort of vanilla butter-based cream. So I don't want to say confected either, because that's a pejorative term. I think that it's a very delicious, soft, creamy flavor, which isn't just dairy cream.
I think it's very nice.
The fruit again is really, it's ripe. It's quite aptly, but it's very, very ripe apple, and it's as though, you know, any decent English apple has obviously got good acidity to go with its beautiful fruit, and that's the kind of acid we have here. Not a raw Bramley acid, but a much more juicy, crisp acid. I think it's a really tremendous wine.
I agree. It's tremendously soft, but there is enough acid running through it. It kind of hits everything you want from the traditional method sparkling. There is cream. It's not sour cream. It's that sweeter cream. There's almost like a cakey. It does feel like a
cake sponge.
Getting the toilets, you're getting cake. It's delicious.
Sponge cake. I'm getting sponge cake flavors off it.
Yeah.
Really nice. I wonder. We'll ask Sam what the residual sugar on, what the dosage is. But if whatever she's used for the dosage, it's absolutely the right dosage.
I think interestingly, it won't be high. It won't be a high dosage. I think it's more about and again, I think it's more about the positioning of the vineyard and the pH of the juice as it comes in, and the balance, and in many respects that's the hallmark of the wine. So I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but it's that softness. It's very impressive.
And also two things. Firstly, those vines have been there for quite a long time. She's got, if these are from her best Chardonnays, they've been in the ground for quite a long time. Secondly, it's interesting to note this one is 12.5% alcohol. And a lot of the English ones are, even the Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs are 12. So all of these things are implying that when Sam says Sussex is the sunniest county, and Bolney is the earliest ripening site in Sussex. I'm not sure anyone's actually taken her to task on that. But if that's what she says, well, here's an example of, well, perhaps you're right, Sam.
Sweet spot. It's a sweet spot.
Sweet spot, yeah.
Okay, guys, so moving on. Let's now try the white Bacchus.
Yeah, let's do that.
You can see the label?
Here's the label.
There we are.
Yep, very good. Okay.
Now this is the Lichgate Bacchus, and in fact, it's the Lichgate of the local church, and I think you can virtually see it from the winery. And this again is an interesting thing, because what do we do with Bacchus? Kieron, I know that you do a lot of work with Bacchus. I want my Bacchus to really have a strong aromatic smell. I want to smell that elderflower. I want to get that hedgerowy thing. It's
a tremendously interesting grape variety, because it isn't Sauvignon Blanc as much as we would like it to be Sauvignon Blanc in many respects, in regards to the public appeal for Sauvignon Blanc and their understanding of it, and almost removing France from the equation. But I think in many respects, it conjures up images of New Zealand, which is interesting. Yeah. And I think that Bacchus is very much England's New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. And actually, I found that you can go down two routes. You can go down a route which is about tropical fruit, which is about gooseberry, and you very much get that with this wine. But with this wine, which I think is massively impressive, it's also about varietal characteristic, which cannot come from a yeast, that cannot come from a bacteria, that comes from the soil, which comes from the grape. And that's truly impressive with this wine, because and its softness.
And again, she's been making Bacchus there for quite a long time. But you say it can't come from the yeast, but you presumably can use a yeast which lifts aromatics, like the New Zealanders have successfully done for so long.
Oh, absolutely. So there are yeasts that are produced by Lallemand and by Lefort that target the aromatic profile exactly for Sauvignon Blanc, and so therefore akin to a Bacchus. and the weather isn't the same as New Zealand, and the proximity to the sun actually, I think, is more of the point in regards to latitude and longitude. And if you were to put, so I should say longitude, and if you were to put New Zealand in the northern hemisphere, actually we're on the same latitude as Tuscany, and so you know, jumping further north, that's why Bacchus works. And actually, the yeasts which you can use, which you know, are trying to give you those big gooseberry flavors, they have to suit the grape variety, and if they don't, it tastes out of kilter. And I was trying to describe a wine actually that I'd made recently, where it's a lovely wine, very well received, but it didn't seem to match the variety. And this is why I think this wine is a triumph, because it matches the variety so well, in that you've got the tropical, and this there's clearly been a match with the yeast, which makes it work tremendously well, where you've got the tropical, you've got the gooseberry, you've got those lifted flavors, but you've also got a varietal character, which I think can only come from the Bolney estate. And for a winery, that's exactly what you want to achieve.
Because I get a lot of that lovely hedgerow and elderflower thing, which I really like. Now, some people say, "Oh, that's just a generic smell." I would say, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
It really isn't. A proper, a nicely done Bacchus, just like a nicely done cool climate Sauvignon Blanc, it isn't just a generic smell. It is of its place and its variety. And with this one, I found on the palate that it's got a really juicy, crisp apple acidity, a little bit of pear juiciness, but a length which has got a little bit something like a mint leaf, as though you'd plucked a mint leaf out of the garden and just chewed it a little bit. You know how that rather insistent minty flavor sticks in your mouth. And I must admit, I think it's a really delightful drink. Do you think it's a little softer than you'd expect, Kieron?
Yeah, again, I'd be interested to talk to Sam shortly, and I know we cover it quite often, and perhaps I'm a little bit obsessed by it, and I think we talked a little bit off there about acidity and the perception of English wine, where it was with acid. All of these wines are very balanced and are soft, and I'd be interested to know whether or not that's a house style and how they achieve it. I think this wine, you know, for English Bacchus, again, it's so soft. But you raise a great point about hedgerows. These aren't hedgerows from Kent. These aren't hedgerows from Essex. These aren't hedgerows from Derbyshire. These are hedgerows from Sussex, and I know the area well. And I think that is the beauty of wine, where it comes from. I don't want to say the T word, the terroir. I will say terroir, but you do get that impression it's from somewhere, and I think that's so nice.
There are lots of sort of spiky, hawthorny hedgerows, aren't there? Always, all of those areas running sort of just below the South Downs, running up a few miles north up towards Haywards Heath that way. I absolutely get that feeling about it. I think this is another thing that I think is worth thinking about is this is 2019. Now, after the great summer, which never ended in 2018, we had the summer which looked as though it would never end, and then it came down like a guillotine in September, and we never saw another day's sun before Easter. But somehow I'm a big fan of the 19s. The 19s, the ones that didn't have the autumn, I think that they seem to be fundamentally pretty nearly ripe enough by the time the rains came in. Or was it that there's so much good quality fruit and well handled, well looked after, good quality fruit sitting in the vineyards that with the rains, good wine growers could make really lovely fruit?
It's a good point. 18 was almost perfect, and why it was almost perfect was because in many respects we didn't have the right grapes for 18. We don't grow. It was too good. So if we were growing Riesling, if we were producing Chardonnays for white wine with Chardonnay clones for white wine, then 18 probably would have been the perfect year. But in many respects, it finished too soon, which meant, and I say too soon, in the 18 had perfect figures of perfect sugar figures and perfect acid figures, but whether or not it had phenolically perfect fruit. Now, what was so interesting about 19, actually, I really like 19, was that you had all the perfect wood from 18 left over. So you had all those distal buds, you had all those pre-built buds within your vine, perfect conditions. Then you had a great start to the season, as you say, a disappointing end, but actually the disappointing end was a normal English summer.
Yes.
So it actually was very good growing conditions for a normal year. So when you see a variety like Bacchus in a 19, in many respects, it probably displays more character than an 18, although I'm sure the crop was less. So it's an interesting one between the accountant and the winemaker, and which year they prefer the most. And again, another good question for Sam.
I'm hearing quite a lot of winemakers quietly saying that they like their 19 better than their 18. And I'm certainly hearing some winemakers saying they think 20 is going to be the best of the lot.
Yeah, I think 20 is the best figures.
Okay, so guys, can we move on to the red, the Pinot Noir? Let's have a look at those labels. Oz, can we?
Yep.
Great stuff. Now, I've tried this before, and this is one of my all-time favourites. This will definitely be making an appearance in Cheshire. So, what do we think?
I think that Sam and her crew have been working hard at Pinot for longer than almost anybody, and it is just possible that they've got the oldest Pinot Noirs in the country. And it's just possible that her dad in 1972, when he planted the first vineyard on an old pig farm, which used to be called Booker's rather than Bolney, by the way, they might even, as long ago as that, have put a few Pinot Noirs in. Certainly, Sam says she seems to have been living with Pinot Noir ever since she was a little girl. I think that they have made a considered attempt to say we're not trying to make Burgundy. I think that they have said there must be an English style, and we want to make our wine in an English style rather than the continental style. I think that this light, delicate, rather cool, rather rose hip and red currant jelly sort of flavor, the sappiness, the twigginess that sometimes they get in is delightfully cool climate and English and reserved. But I think this one, again, a 2019, is possibly the best wine they've made. It's just got a bit more. It's still very cool climate. It's very Bolney, but it's just got a bit more of everything.
I think I think all the three wines have been similar, and they've displayed a confidence that I don't think we've come across necessarily, in that they're all trying to, these wines are products of Bolney, and the sparkling isn't trying to be a champagne. The Bacchus isn't trying to be a Sauvignon Blanc, and the Pinot isn't trying to be a Burgundian Pinot Noir. They are trying to be the best versions of themselves, which in 2020, the year of being the best version of yourself, I think is an interesting one. And again, I'm looking forward to talking to Sam about her winemaking ethos and the estate's winemaking ethos. Yeah. Because it's a mightily impressive range of wines.
It is, and it's wonderfully, for really high quality wines here. All three, they're wonderfully uncomplicated in a way. They're unsophisticated. It's as though they just have a natural beauty about them, without any makeup and without any glad rags and without any silly tricks. Yeah. They're just saying, we are a really attractive bunch of wines. Enjoy us for what we are. I'm impressed.
I think they would be enjoyed by the wine connoisseur through to someone who doesn't drink wine necessarily, but just go, just would pick up a glass of any of those three bottles and enjoy them.
Because things like tannin, for instance, the tannin is barely noticeable on this Pinot Noir, the bitterness, and yet it's got as much structure as you can want. Now, I've aged Bolney Pinot Noirs for about 3 years, is as much as I've aged them, but they've never collapsed. And there's another thing about that, of course, she's using screw cap.
Yes.
And she went, I think, to screw cap in 2017. And it seems to me, if you're making this rather delicate, rather fragrant style of wine, I would have thought screw cap is exactly the right thing to do.
Wow.
Well, I think that's a perfect moment to bring Samantha Linter to join Forever Thirsty. Sam, are you there? Just connecting up your audio.
Yeah, indeed. Hello.
Sam,
When was the last time you were called Samantha?
Sam. Samantha's my naughty name.
Well, Charlie's obviously taken to you in a naughty way then. So.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you very much for joining us. We've all thoroughly enjoyed your wines. So I think I'm leaving in the tender hands of Kieron and Oz.
Hi, Sam.
Hi, Kieron. How you doing?
I'm really well. Really enjoyed your wines.
Brilliant. Good.
I think what's been so interesting about all three is they've had such a personality. Not in comparison, they've just had a complete personality of their own. And I guess as a winemaker, the question is, do you discuss how to bring out personality, or is it something that's inbuilt in the grapes? How do you achieve these sort of flavors?
So our ethos is and always will be to not fiddle too much with the grapes and the wine, to try and let them reflect what they do in that year. Unless obviously it's a bit of a tricky year, then you have to. But so we try to just let the grapes just express themselves. So it's gentle winemaking with the white wines. It's cool fermenting, and just trying not to really put in too many different things, not use too many different fining agents, just keep everything to the minimum and just let them be themselves. So I think really that style is what we're after, that just the natural style, what the grapes do for themselves. It's more about the work in the vineyard, I think, than what we're actually doing in the winery. The winery should take care of the grapes to make them into a really nice wine. We do work harder in the vineyard to make sure that the grapes come in with the ripeness levels and the quality we're looking for to do that, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. There's some noticeably higher aromatics in all the wines, especially with the sparkling. Obviously, we've been at enough trade things to taste other people's wines, and again, is that just from the fruit itself? And have you gone out and chosen clones and rootstocks that achieve that, or do you think that's a product of your soil and your sunny site?
I think it is. I mean, Bolney's been going, as I'm sure some of you are aware, for a very long time, since 1972. So we've had time to work out what grows really well on our sandstone soils in the terms of clones and rootstocks. And we've replanted with that in mind. And we did in the 80s, my parents planted a trial site where they actually had, 9 different varieties in there with different clones, different rootstocks to see what worked. So that was amazing, because that allowed me, when I came along in the 90s, to actually really look at that and what we planted. So I think some of it's about the clone and rootstock being what we think is works for our site, rather than going into it massively scientifically. It's we planted this and actually that one's worked really well, so we're going to plant that. But I think also sandstone's an interesting soil variety, isn't it? Because we've got a lot of people around us that are on chalk, which we're not. And we do see quite differences in those wines compared to our wines.
It's interesting that you say that, Sam, because you've never seemed to me to have the slightest desire to suddenly go and get yourself some chalk, like almost all your other colleagues around the area have all been desperately saying, we're on sandstone, find us some chalk. But if you actually look at the early Nye Timbers, the early ridge views, and if you then look even over towards things like the original Gusborns and things, there was no chalk in any of those wines.
No.
And they're the ones that blew people away when they arrived. Are you still of the opinion that your site is not only in the sunniest county, but it is the earliest ripening site in the sunniest county?
I'm impressed you remembered that. Yes, I am firmly of that opinion. We are one of the earliest ripening sites, certainly in Sussex, that I am aware of. So we're still picking pretty early. You're right. The original Nye Timber site actually is on the same sandstone ridge that Bolney sits on as well. I think we make good wines at Bolney. We're really pleased with the styles we're getting. I don't want to chase that chalk dream. I like what we do. I like what we've gained from that. And it's just being true to your roots as well, isn't it? And true to where you came from, I think, is where we sit, really. If we thought we could do something amazing and different, and that's what we needed to do because the wines we were making weren't up to the standards we wanted them to be, then I think you would chase something else, wouldn't you? But it's where we started, and I think we were really lucky that my parents just happened to land upon an amazing site completely by happenstance, and there we are, and we've stuck with that.
But your 2016 Blanc de Blanc is, to my mind, it's as Kieron was saying, one of the most original Blanc de Blancs made in 16 in England, and possibly before and since. And it's not the same as some of your previous ones. There's something rounder, fluffier, creamier. We were trying to work out what sort of cream was it, and I ended up something to do with one of my mother's sort of Victoria sponge cakes when I was growing up as a kid, including the spongy, lovely, that little brown bit at the edge of the cake where the cake and confectioner's cream inside there, not the old French thing of crème fraîche, not dairy cream, but confectioner's cream. And we were thinking, but it's all beautifully balanced. It's not because the last thing it is confected. It just, something has made this lovely, fluffy, creamy, but balanced wine in 16. Was it something you did, or was 16 a particular vintage?
What did we do in 16? We had a new press. So we upgraded our press. We were able to press more gently than we had previously. So we've definitely seen some differences in the wine from doing that. What we have done more recently is we've actually been experimenting with aging the wines on cork after degorging. And in the earlier wines, we were running through them very quickly, and our sparkling, shockingly, were being released between sort of 1 month and 3 months after having degorged them. We upgraded our equipment, our degorging equipment, so we could actually degorge much faster. So rather than degorging almost to order, now we're degorging sort of 6 to 12 months in advance of needing to release that wine. So I think a lot of the differences we're seeing in all of our sparklings, and the Blanc de Blanc included, is a lot more cork age as well. And then I put some of it back to how we're pressing the grapes, because the presses we have now are much better than the ones we had before.
What presses have you got now?
So we have they're still the bladder presses. My brain's gone completely. I can't even remember the name of it now, but they're bigger. They've got more programming in them. We program them ourselves as well. They're very gentle. They've got better drains running through the middle now than the ones we had before. The ones we had before, they were 1 ton presses. So you were running the grapes through quite quickly in order to get everything pressed in time. Whereas now we've got a 10 ton press, a whole bunch press, and and a 5 whole ton press, whole bunch press. So we can do things much more slowly. We can let the pressing be more gentle and for a longer period of time. So that's making a really big difference for us. And the ones we had before, we actually bought them secondhand. So we're about 30 years old when we bought them. So now we've got brand new ones.
I actually wanted to buy your press when it came on, Sam.
Did you?
It got snapped up, I think, by Defined Wine.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, but I did have my eye on it, but I didn't have my checkbook ready.
So I'll let you know when we sell the next one.
2016 was the first vintage you used that.
It was, yes.
Well,
Yes.
it may just be that it's making a substantial difference.
Mm.
And now that you've got a new winery,
Yes.
right, a new extra part of winery, have you also got a new storage area?
We have, yes. In fact, the old winery has now become an extra storage area as well. So
Because
we've doubled it.
2018, 2019,
Yeah.
and then 2020, have you been bringing in much bigger volumes than you've ever brought in before?
Yes, 18 was an amazing but very challenging year. The volume to process through the winery and the volume to put into the store has maxed us out. And 19 was a pretty big vintage as well, as you know. So we're the bonded store. There's a lot of a lot of wine in those two stores. 20 was amazing, but the volume was down in 20. We all had like bunch weights. So we didn't actually crop so much, which in a way was a relief, because I think we would have been challenged to actually store it.
And as the size of your vineyard, or not your vineyard, sorry, how much do you look to press in a normal year? And I know you're contract winemaking now as well. So you know, how much wine would you like to make in any given year?
So the winery we have now can do between 300 and 500,000 bottles. So it's pretty significant. This year we actually processed through 240,000 bottles in it. So half its capacity. This year was lovely. It was one of those really, really easy years where you had less coming in and time to experiment and do different things with the wines. We had really had some fun this year. Previous years we've been up to sort of 300,000 bottles plus with contract. So we are expected to keep growing into our winery.
And where are you going to get to, do you think? What's your have you got a target in mind? I know you guys have always growing and looking to the future. What's your plan?
For Bolney, I want us to still be a boutique vineyard. We've gone through planning and thinking about racing ahead with the others and being really big and going 500 and million plus bottles a year. We've considered that, and actually it's a good business model for us to stay around 250, 300,000 bottles for Bolney to make and sell. And I think it means that we can just keep our focus on being boutique in world terms, not in English terms, and making the wines that we want to make and making them how we want to make them, rather than feeling pressurized just to keep growing. So that's where we're going to sit, and the extra wines we'll make in the winery will be for other people. And
since you mentioned your extra capacity, and since you mentioned the fact that you think that the extra time on cork on the 16 Blanc de Blanc has made a difference, does this mean that now you'll be able to leave your wines a bit longer before you release them? Yeah, always been a problem for us. We've never really made enough wine in the past. 2018 actually was a bit of a game changer for us, in that it just suddenly out of nowhere, obviously most of us lost our crop in 17, as you know. So we're having to run wines through for years really quickly in order to have wines to sell. And being a family vineyard, we've grown organically. So we've not had huge big investments come in that have allowed us to lay stock down for years. We've had to make and sell it as we go. Whereas now with the 18 vintage, it's actually finally given us that opportunity to actually now lay wine down. And we've always wanted to do it, especially with the sparklings and especially with the reds, especially the Pinot Noir. Get some bottle age on that before we have to sell it.
Sam, with the winemaking, I think what was really impressed all of us was, again, how individual it was to Bolney, and I think you can almost taste the local area, the terroir. It does come through, and again, the sparkling isn't like a champagne; it's like an English sparkling wine. And I think the Bacchus isn't like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc; it's like an English Bacchus. And again, I just wondered whether or not, you know, are you doing things? So, do you whole bunch press, for instance, all of your white grapes? Do you, malolactic fermentations? Is that something you do? You know, do you have a playbook, or do you just go, okay, the fruit's here, and then obviously I know you've got an excellent winemaking team. Do you kind of come together and, you know, just discuss how do you do it?
So we walk the vineyards as all winemakers should do pre-harvest. We will know the quality and the ripeness levels and the flavors of the berries before they come into the winery. So I think that's really important. And we'll meet and discuss and plan what we think we want to do with that fruit as it comes in. So we've already got those plans in place. I mean, like most winemakers, we have recipes, if you like, if you want to call them that, so we know what we would normally do with each wine and how we'd process it. But we also do like to crush and de-stem our still wines, not necessarily all of them, but we don't just go for whole branch pressing. And we've always liked to do that. One, because it gives us more skin contact in the press, but two, because I'm never 100% convinced that English stems ripen as well as they should do. So the contact in the press, especially for still wines, I think can bring in some slight bitter tannins, some slight astringency that you don't want in the wines, which can detract. So we do that. But then that allows us to get more flavour and aroma through, because we're doing more skin contact by doing that as well. So that's very much a Bolney thing. And with the sparkling wines, we don't ferment with. I know if you're with the traditional method, a lot of people use a more neutralising yeast when they ferment the first ferment. We don't. We always go for a yeast that will bring out the optimum flavours and aromas of that variety. So we're looking to put the flavour in right from the beginning.
And what about dosage on something like the Blanc de Blanc?
We try to keep them low. We don't like sweet wines at Bolney. We obviously you're looking to make the wine commercial, so people want to enjoy drinking it. But we do like to keep the dosage low if we can. I mean, the early years we had dosages up at 12, 13, whereas now the Blanc de Blanc you tried today is at 8. But our tradition now, traditionally, we will have our sparkling wines between 6 and 8, very rarely higher.
The sweet spot.
The sweet spot, exactly. Yeah.
But I think that going on to the Bacchus, maybe, Kieron, that picking up what Kieron said, it is a wine full of personality. I think it's the best Lichgate that I've tasted. I have
a glass here.
Oh, so have I.
Oh, must be good.
I think it's kept all its easy drinking quality, which I know you like to do on the Lichgate.
Yeah.
But just as Kieron was saying about things like the hedgerows, I have, this is where people worry about us wine tasters, but I have a place in my mind tasting your Bacchus of some of those sort of hawthorny, hedgerowy pieces of land running on the north side of the South Downs there, and the fields and the old-fashioned feeling of a lovely sylvan bucolic part of England. I get that, as well as magnificent aromatics of elderflower and blackcurrant leaf, and a finish which is as though I just chewed a mint leaf, gone into the garden in the summer, taken just a leaf, chewed. You know how that mint, when you chew it and throw it away, it sticks around. You don't get rid of that flavour for a bit. I found it in that, and I must say, is this all Bolney fruit, or is it also Putchurch fruit? Because could you tell us about the Putchurch thing and what this is the this is the new big chunk of vineyard that Sam has gone into a partnership with just a couple of miles down the road, and that was in 2018. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
So, can you just tell us what that has done to you as a winery, and what kind of extra flavors or character it has brought?
We're still discovering Putchurch because it's only really started fully producing this year. but we did get a small harvest from it in 19 as well. It is different. The grapes ripen more slowly on that site, not a lot, but we will pick the Bolney site before we pick the Pootchurch site, and it's only 2 miles away, which is quite interesting. Again, it's south facing sandstone as well, so very similar to what we have. There's a microclimate at our site at Bolney, which on the main field, that just gets so warm that even our other Bolney vineyards, which are still on the same plot but a little bit further away, they don't get quite so warm as that one. So we do find the Pootchurch fruit comes in slightly differently, with slightly different flavours. It's quite interesting. And this year we actually managed to, because we had a significant amount of fruit, we actually had fermenting tanks of everything separately. It was really interesting seeing what the different fruit characteristics were coming from Pootchurch compared to Bolney. The Pootchurch ones were a little bit more gooseberry, so a little bit more, I think, what people expect from a Bacchus, which the Bolney site just doesn't do. It doesn't bring those flavours out. You're right, it has, I don't know why it has those hedgerows and elderflower characteristics, but when we have Muller and other varieties at Bolney, we got the same thing. Well, okay, Muller has elderflower anyway, I know, but we've always bought those characteristics out from our site. It's I'm not quite sure why. I've never discovered that. It's interesting. But yeah, so Pootchurch is different, slightly different characteristics coming through, but still the same soils and still south-facing.
I didn't realise that actually the Pootchurch was so new. So you don't, it's so recently planted, you haven't yet got full vintages of it.
No, sadly not.
So this
year.
Bacchus here then would be all Bolney fruit, but
is it
clay sites? Those clay sites behind the winery, as against the lovely, warm, silky, sandy sites in front of the winery.
Yeah, so it's got some on the sandy site and some on those clay sites. You would have seen, yeah, you're right, behind the winery on the flatter bit there. So I would say probably half and half, half clay, half sandstone.
And 2019, how do you think of that as a vintage? I must say, I'm a tremendous fan of 2019. I think it's bursting with personality and with a freshness in its table wines that 2018, amazingly, sometimes doesn't quite have.
It's interesting, isn't it? 2018 was an incredible summer, and we started to see really, really good ripeness coming through in 18. But we all had so much fruit. We were leaving grapes on the vines. People were going around saying, will somebody have my grapes? And nobody could fit it into the winery. And I think for me, what happened in 18 is that whilst it was really good, there was a big volume, and it was just to process it in the facilities that we all had that weren't used to processing that volume of fruit coming in as quickly as it needed to, because you needed to pick it off quick as well in 18. It was quite challenging. We were finding some of our varieties were actually beginning to slightly shrivel towards the end of harvest on the vine, and we were so trying to get them in so quickly. And I wonder, with 18, looking back on it now, that problem was so amazing, but it actually stretched us a little bit too much. And I know we felt a little bit stretched in our winery, that we would have liked to have been a little bit more careful and taken a bit more time, which we just did not have. Whereas in 19, still a big vintage, but nowhere near as big, we were able to cope so much better. So for us, in 18, we're in the old winery. It was much smaller, so really challenged. At the 19, we're in the new winery, had lots and lots of space, so managed to just enjoy being in there really and processing the fruit in a more careful way. So I think, yeah, 18 was a bit of a rush.
And is the 19 got new equipment, like your new press in the 2016 seems to have made a difference to the fruit? Did you have new equipment for this 2019 Lichgate Bacchus, which I think is the best Lichgate you've made? Thank you.
Yes, new sorting table, new crusher destemmer, a second new press we had in that year as well, better heating and chilling system for the tanks. That was much more efficient than the chill system we had for the tanks in the previous year. That made a difference because we were keeping the wines at a much more stable temperature, and we cool ferment. So we cool ferment it around 15 degrees, 16 degrees. Whereas in the old winery, sometimes it would go up and down a little bit around that because it's harder to keep that consistency of temperature. The new system keeps it exactly where we need it to be. So that makes a difference as well.
And that lovely acidity, is that a characteristic of the 19 vintage?
Yes, I think there's a lovely freshness through all of the wines we made in 19. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask about your
Sorry, Kieron.
Pinot Noir production, and I think you're one of the. I think it'd be fair to say you're one of the forerunners of English red wine, which is often an easy target for abuse. But your red and this Pinot is fantastic. Is there an approach to red wine production and Pinot Noir specifically that you guys have in the winery? What is your process?
Yeah, going back to what you're saying, I've loved to tell everybody we were one of the pioneers of red wine production in the UK, and I had lots of abuse over the years, but that's just made me more determined to do it and to prove everybody it can be done. I don't like to be told you can't do something, so I'd like to try and prove that you can. Yeah, we've worked really hard on this over the years. Honestly, in the early years when we first started making it, I wouldn't have said I was that proud of it. It's taken us a while to really get this working. I think more work in the vineyard as well, actually. I think that the early Pinot we were bringing in wasn't really ripe enough. So we've done a lot with the canopy management of the vines. We've planted more vines more recently of Pinot Noir as well. So vines have gone in 6 and 7, 06 and 07, with different clones that we weren't using before as well. So
what clones have you got? Have you got German, Burgundian, and sparkling?
We have, yes, mostly Dijon clones, then which we didn't have to start off with. We started with some German ones, then we went when we bought the Dijon ones, and now we've got sparkling ones as well. So sparkling ones, obviously sparkling wines. Some of the Dijon or Burgundy clones we use as sparkling wine as well. It depends on what they're doing in that year or what site they're on. So one of our vineyard sites, they just ripen beautifully. Another one it can be a challenge depending on the year. So they'll go to sparkling if they're not ripe enough for the red.
And do you cold macerate these wines, Sam?
We do now, yes. So we've been we bought, again with the new winery, we bought a fair few 1,500 litre presses. So not presses, tanks, with VC lids, so that we could hand punch them down, and they can go in now and they'll do a cold maceration, holding them at a cool temperature and then slowly warming them up then to start fermenting them. So we've been doing that the last couple of years. So I think you've got the 18 Pinot you've tried, haven't you? So I don't think we did 19. That in that year. 19. Oh yeah, so we've done some cold mac on that, yeah.
Which I must have
done even more with the 20.
I think, again, I've been tasting your Pinots for years. I think this is the best Pinot you've made.
Thank you. It's 19 again. It's coming through.
It doesn't taste like Burgundy. It doesn't taste like New Zealand or Chile or Germany. It tastes like just a development of that lovely, cool, pale, rather rose hippie and red currant jelly-ish, sappy. Again, we're going back to those hedgerows again, Kieron.
Yeah.
There's that English, cool, calm quality about it. Which I think that you've just got a little bit more of all of that in the 19 than you've ever had before. And I think this is a really beautiful wine.
I think
Thank you.
I must be, from someone who's grown up on the vineyard and has been the winemaker for so long, it must be sometimes hard to take a step back and realize what you're producing. It's really very special, Sam. It's honestly.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
So let's end on a very high note then. Sam, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We're looking forward to getting all your wines onto the Forever Thirsty website. So
Cheers to that.
You can have the chance to buy some for Christmas. Don't forget, Ozzy.
I've got my book at home.
This is absolutely, it's great reading. It's all about, it's not just about wine and technicalities. It's about England. It's about Englishness. It really is, and we need a bit of cheering up. So this is a really good book to put into stockings or whatever for Christmas time. So Sam, thank you very much indeed. Oz as ever. Kieron, great stuff. And always remember to remain forever thirsty.
Forever
you.
thirsty.
And buy the book. It's
Thanks.
excellent. Cheers.